ICQ Podcast episode 263, operating GB80GGCN. Hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts and welcome to this our 263rd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by Peter Caffery, Dean Sproul and Patrick Bean, and of course our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Bill November 3 Juliet India X-Ray, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Matthew Mike 0 November Juliet X-Ray to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on operating a GB80 Golf Charlie November. Well, as always, it's our donations that keep the podcast show advert free, and we'd like to thank someone of those this episode, Peter Caffery, who sent along a note saying he appreciates the content, and thank you for your roundtable conversations, and congratulations for completing 9 years into many more. So thanks for that, Peter. And Dean Sprout and Patrick Bean also sent across one-off donations as well, and we really appreciate those. Those, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors, to keep us advert free. It means we don't have to be plying you with adverts, either for amateur radio gear or for all sorts of weird and wonderful things that podcasts promote. So consider us and keep us advert free by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send our way is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Edmund, Leslie, Bill and Matthew as they discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including e-licensing for ham radio in Indonesia. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to the News Roundtable for episode 263 of the ICQ podcast. Tonight, I have Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0, CIB with me. Hi, Leslie.
Good evening, Martin. Great to be back on again.
Yeah, good to have you, Leslie, as always, and I think it'll be fun again if our pre-chat is anything like what the show's going to be. Hi. I also have Mr. Edmund Spicer, sorry, I almost put you in Scotland, Edmund, M0MMG. How you doing, Edmund?
I'm all right, thank you. Yes, I'm very definitely on the south coast of England. Hello, Martin, and hello, everybody.
Yeah, hi, Edmund. Well, don't worry. I mean, I almost gave you an MM as a Scottish call sign, but the number of people who go, GM1 them, and I go, no, I'm not a Scottish station. So, yeah, no problems. And we have Mr. Matthew Nessar with us, M0NJX. Hi, Matt.
Hey, everybody. Hi. How you doing?
Good to have you, Matt. And the other side of the big pond, we have Mr. Bill Barnes, M3JIX. Hi, Bill.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Martin, and everyone in the group.
Yeah, good to have you with us, Bill. And as I say, yeah, nice to be back again as a group. Starting our first news story, this is to do with GatesAir have suspended sales of their AM transmitters. Now, when I first read this, I thought, I don't know, this looks a bit naughty because are they stopping AM transmitters? Is it all going to fall down the pan? And I read a bit further and it's kind of, no, they're doing it for a very sensible reason. Bill, do you want to go first since Gates are a US company?
Yeah, Gates used to be called Harris when I was a kid, or maybe even a little bit further back than that. But they're a large manufacturer. They're out of Ohio and I believe Illinois. And they're cutting back on well, they're not selling any more of the AM transmitters. They're cutting back on their stock, holding it to take care of, existing customers, which is pretty good. And it sounds like they're developing new stuff for the AM transmitter. They just don't have that spinned up completely yet. And this stuff happens frequently. A company will not be able to get, replacement parts, and so they got to make hard choices to take care of their current customers. So I think it's actually a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very similar to YOTA releasing the FT818, isn't it? From pictures I've seen, it looks very similar to an 817, but it's an updated technology, and probably the only changes there are to do with getting part supply. So, Matthew, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think Bill's summarized it well. I mean, this is a commercial decision by a fairly well-known name, although it's new to me in this story. But I understand they go way back. They clearly are focused on their existing client base, right? Existing broadcast stations using AM, using their equipment. Some of the parts are getting harder to allocate. I mean, that's the technical trend. That how often have we heard that where a product that's been in the market for a number of years is now it's difficult to find the supply chain that goes behind that development of that product. So something is clearly more difficult to source, and so they're going to reserve the stock that they have to support existing clients, and that makes perfect sense from a business perspective. And as Bill mentioned, it's not a case of we're just going to wind down the AM business. The article refers to some excitement in the Gates company about some of the new developments in technology that are coming out of electric car design, talking about some of the improvements that they can bring to market maybe in the next few years in the AM space. So I think AM as a medium is still going to be supported by the sounds of it, but it will be done in a new way, which is that's progress, right? That's evolution. That's good.
Certainly is, Matt. Edmund, you said that you didn't think you'd heard a Gates transmitter. We may have them in the UK. What's your thoughts on all this?
Well, I've never experienced AM in the States because I'm one of these people who doesn't travel very much and have never been outside of Europe. But I'm glad that this isn't signalling the end of that mode in America, because I know they have 10 kilohertz spacing, don't they, as opposed to the 9 that is more common in Europe and the UK, which makes AM stereo possible. In theory, I don't know if that's still carried on these days, but I would like to hear it, like to experience it. And the AM band goes all the way up to 1700 kilohertz, I think. So there's 100 kilohertz extra worth of bandwidth. So there's certainly a lot of scope for having AM transmitters out there in the States, but no, this is not really a story that I can comment on.
Yeah, well, you say you don't travel, Edmund, but you travelled up to London to see us on the weekend. More probably that a bit later, I expect, isn't it?
That's relatively close by, though. America's a bit further away, unfortunately, but I know a lot of equipment these days is coming to the end of its life. Absolute Radio in the UK, which is one of the 3 national independent radio stations, they're currently seeking permission from Ofcom to close about half a dozen or so of their smaller relay transmitters dotted around the UK, because those transmitters are coming towards the end of their life, and it would be not viable to replace them, or the parts would be in short supply. So it's a problem that might affect us in the UK as well eventually.
Yeah, I reckon so. Leslie, we've left you to last. What do you think on all this?
Well, Martin, I agree with you. Initially, you read this story and you think, oh, not another bad news story. But, in technology, if you're staying still, you're actually going backwards. That's the nature of the beast, and it's changing. And this is what the company's doing. They're saying, well, okay, things are changing. We've got to decide where we're going to go. And they've made a decision. And that's actually half the battle. I actually think it's a sensible thing to do, actually.
Yeah, and they've announced it rather than sort of just letting it cloud over. So, yeah, all in all, Gates, we think you've done the right thing here at the ICQ podcast, so that's a good one. Moving on to our next news story, China are about to put a lunar rover on the moon later this year in December. And then they're going to put 2 satellites around the moon and send data back, amateur radio data back, it looks like. So, Leslie, do you want to go first on this one?
No, I thought you were the satellite person, Martin. Yeah, you know all about this. Come on. You have a shot. Come on.
I'm still learning satellites, Leslie, but I kind of get excited about this stuff.
I knew you'd do. That's you go first, Martin. I know you're just buying at the chase on this one.
No, well, I think it's interesting how China are doing this, but then also sending data back from via amateur radio. So that to me sounds quite interesting. Bill, you've done a bit of satellite as well, haven't you?
Yeah, a little bit. I see that the downlinks, they're going to put these two. They're not really. Well, I guess they're kind of CubeSats. They're 50 by 50 by 40 centimeter, and they're going to float them around the moon, and they're going to be UHF download. I know how to decode. One of the modes is going to be JT65B. Okay, I know how to get that one. The other one I don't know is the 250 bits per second GMSK with concatenated codes. I got to do a little more research to figure out what that one is, because I'm not sure how to decrypt that. But a while ago, had to have been back in December, we talked about an Essex ham making an EME moon bounce contact off of with 10 watts. But I'm feeling that antenna that she used, it was like a 17 element Yagi. I bet you that's going to be the cat's meow for downloading the signals from these guys.
Yeah, you could be right. But there are people out there that have got it. And I think, I can't remember the acronym now, but the International Space Station, you and I were talking about this earlier, has only got a finite lifetime, and probably in the next 5 to 10 years, it will have reached its useful life expectancy. And I know that NASA are talking about putting a deep space station a bit further out, aren't they, Bill?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly that. It's been a couple weeks since I saw that article, but it was, I think they were going to talk about building another station between like here and Earth, maybe in like what was it, Lagrange 1 or 2, that's halfway between the moon and the Earth, and it's supposed to be like a stable place to put stuff. I know there's some satellites hanging out there, but I don't know what else, if that's what they're talking about next or not.
Yeah, I think the idea was that they're going to get better coverage or a wider footprint when they send the signal back to Earth. And also, they were talking about it being a stop-off point or a staging point for other solar explorations later on. So, interesting what NASA are doing. Edmund, any thoughts on this one?
My mind boggles, but if software comes out that allows me to decode this particular transmission type, then I'll certainly listen out for it. But I think I might need to upgrade my my elk log periodic antenna somehow.
Yeah, well, you may be. I mean, in fairness, if we're aiming it in the right direction out into space, there's a fair chance we should pick this up. I mean, I know you will be a certain amount of attenuation, but in a vacuum, it shouldn't be too much of attenuation out there in space. And, you know, okay, with a big Yagi or a log periodic where you've got lots of gain on it, so, and a narrow beam, that might be a bit more difficult to find. But something like the elk isn't that narrow a beam, so we might be able to pick up, Edmund.
Yeah, but you also get lower gain, don't you? That's the trade-off for having a wider beam. Anyway, my mind is totally boggled by this news story. So
yeah.
I'm just listening with interest. I'm just listening with interest. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's good. Matt, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm with Edmund. So I haven't played with satellites, but if I recap what I'm reading here and what you're discussing, China's going to put a rover lander device on the moon, which is always fantastic anyway. It's going to be accompanied by 2 satellites, cubish satellites, 50 by 50 by 40, as Bill was saying. And those satellites will relay from the Earth to these landers, or this lander rover, a telecommand sort of protocol, right? I think this is what we're talking about, digital modes. This is not sort of hams talking to each other through a an uplink downlink kind of thing. This is science telecommand communications kind of network. But it's open to amateurs if they have access with the decryption software or digital software. It says, I've lost the page now, radio amateurs will be able to transmit commands that allow them to send commands to take and download an image. So there will be something on the moon live. You could go to your computer, request a photograph to be taken from that rover that you have requested, and it will take it and download it to you.
That's interesting, isn't it? That really is interesting.
That is stunning, right? Because I was going to make a comment about it's great to see high cost science. Going to the moon is non-trivial. Building something to work up there is non-trivial, which is accompanied by an amateur radio, satellite, microsat. But when I look in the article, this is much, much more. The Chinese are enabling what seems to be an open protocol, although Bill will tell us in the next podcast how to do it. Maybe. Okay, there's a challenge. But to actually go and take a picture, so EME bouncing, that's exciting because the moon is there, right? It's a long way away and it's a technical challenge. But now how long, this is incredible. Absolutely stunning.
Not to change subject, but I did find that article I read about the next space station, and I'm wrong. It's actually going to orbit the moon, which is trippy.
All right.
Popular mechanics from last year.
Yeah. Well,
it didn't seem that long ago.
We're all going back to the moon, right? This
sure.
is fantastic. This is where we should be going back to the moon. I was a big fan of that. Not the Mars thing yet, but we'll do that eventually. But going to the moon.
I'm a big fan of the Mars thing.
Well,
yeah.
You have longer vision than I have.
It's the ultimate DX.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't there an ARRL award for a two-way communication with somebody on Mars or something? That
I missed that one.
No, I think no, it was Hiram Percy Max, if I've got his name right. There was an award for the first communication with somebody to Mars. So a two-way communication with now whether that's something on Mars or somebody on Mars, but
just by that name, you're referring to something around 1915, right? That kind of period, 1920, or maybe earlier.
Early ARRL, but it's still there. It's still an award that an award that will be given out when it happens.
But that's at a time when people thought that you look at Mars, you can see the canals on Mars. There must be the society, civilization.
Those are sharp eyes. Remember, I found the article. Google. I mean, thank God for Google.
Yeah.
Those with sharp eyes would have noticed a rather arcane object in display on W1AW, a carved wooden statue of bald men holding up a bowl. This piece looks organic, almost primitive, and that is I'm skipping now. That's the Elser Mathis Cup, an award established in 1929 to commemorate the first two-way contact between Earth and Mars. Okay, now my head's spinning. Wow.
Oh, there you go. But I mean, the time delay is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I remember a few years ago, the Germans did a Earth-Venus-Earth contact. And I think the signal took, at the speed of light, took best part of 4 minutes. Well, Mars is even further away, isn't it?
Yeah, Mars is 8 minutes, if I remember the math from trying to the deep space stuff, downloading stuff.
It's the sun, isn't it? The sun is 8 minutes, 8.25 minutes. I'm just see if there's something on the internet. How long does it take to talk to Mars? What does it say? 13
Does the QSO have to be simplex, or can you use the satellite as a repeater?
I don't know, mate.
Like
Great
SOTA.
question. 13 minutes, 48 seconds.
That's what
Once
I said.
again,
So
Google to the rescue. Yeah.
Yeah, so is that 13 minutes each way? So we're talking 26 minutes round trip? Or
yeah, minimum delay was around 4 minutes, maximum delay around 24 minutes. I gotta reread all this now.
I guess
now I got something else to read. Thanks, guys.
yeah, we do it to stitch you up, Bill. Not
it
really.
might depend on the position of Mars, right?
Yeah.
In opposition or in conjunction.
Yes, that's what I'm assuming they're referring to.
Spread of 4 to 24 minutes, but yeah. But it's a long way away. It's on that basis,
it is the most sophisticated technical challenge I could possibly imagine, getting somebody to Mars, period. Just because of the distance, just getting stuff off the planet, getting stuff in transit safely, and getting there. It boggles my mind, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. But we've gone off track. But it is something that space is something. Maybe in 50 years' time, when somebody finds this podcast on this old thing that used to be called the internet, and listens the wireless, and listens to us old boys talking about this, I think, what are they talking about? Yeah, this is old hat. Yeah, we can get there, but it is new, and I think, taking it back to why we started, the lander on the moon, being able to communicate with the satellites, to send commands, to be able to know that they're using amateur frequencies, so we can at least listen in and do what was what. I think it's a really good innovation, and it's not for everybody, but it's interesting technology moving forward.
And it's fun.
Okay, moving on. Next, I've rolled two news stories into one, but e-licensing for hams in Indonesia. There's a number of hams took the electronic licensing in Indonesia, and along with that, 2 9-year-olds passed, which is a bit of a shame, really, because they then said that you can't hold a license until you're 14. So why they let 2 9-year-olds take it, I don't know, but there was something like 291 took the test. What do you think, Edmund?
Well, congratulations on them for passing the thing, and it's a great shame if they've now got to wait another 5 years before they're eligible to apply for a licence. I'm very much in favour of doing online testing. I think I've mentioned before, in my particular case, foundation licence 2009, intermediate 2010, but full licence didn't come till 2013. And the reason there was a big gap between intermediate and full was purely because nobody locally was running a course and organising the possibility for me to sit an exam at a venue and a location that I could get to. If online testing had been available then, I'm pretty sure I would have had the full licence probably in 2011. I definitely wanted it. It wasn't a lack of keenness. So for that reason, I'm very much in favour. And good on them. I've had a look at the test paper for the exam. You can put it through Google Translate. Certain things are lost in translation, and other questions I couldn't answer because I don't have a copy of the local band plan. Almost all of the questions involved the 2-meter band, but with the questions that I could answer based on my pre-existing knowledge, I reckon I would have probably passed.
I'd hope
which
so.
is encouraging.
Yeah, I'd hope so, mate. I'm sure you would, but it is interesting. It is interesting. Matt, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think we were talking earlier about this move towards online testing, e-testing. And we didn't take a straw poll, but maybe I'll sample opinion. How many countries do we think now are moving towards this? I mean, the article talks about this general global trend, but how many countries can we name that have online testing?
Probably us. The States, I think, have some form of it. And, well...
Not that I'm aware of.
Not you're aware of. Okay. I think it's the way it's all going, because lots of other things outside of amateur radio, like the Microsoft exams and, dare I say it, Novell exams back in the 90s were all done electronically on computers. So lots of exams do get done that way. If in the computer industry, it will go that way, I think, Matt.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can imagine the administrative overheads are, I suppose, relatively lower. Maybe they're bigger at the beginning when you have to set up the online system. But Otherwise, it streamlines the whole thing going forward, right? So, but I think it's it's good to see this kind of trend happening. Does it change anything in terms of active hams getting on the air? Does it make it any easier? Not so sure. I mean, there seems to be, as with any country, there's a lot of admin going through in the process. I think, and when I looked at the Indonesian website on the conditions of licensing, I think the license only exists for 12 months. So you have to do this process. You pass the exam, and then you have a license for 12 months, and you have to renew it every 12 months thereafter. So, but will that encourage more people to go through? I don't think they lowered the standards just because it's gone online. So it just may just be.
Can I sort of put my aura on in this one? I mean, I've sort of looked at on how education has changed, and if you look at how the Open University used to do things and videotapes and everything else, and everything sort of got moving online and learning online, and I just think this is a natural progression from that. And I just, the overheads, I agree with you. The initial setup cost is probably a bit higher, but long term, it's, once you've done that, then it's pretty low. I actually think it's long term, this is the way to go. It's got to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, my new job, which I started about just over 3 months ago, they tasked me with doing 7 training courses in the first 3 months. And most of them were in many ways almost irrelevant to my job, in my opinion, but everybody in the company has to do them. And these were all e-learning. And, I sat at home and did them. I did them on a Saturday afternoon. I got paid overtime for doing it, but I sat at home and did them instead of trying to fit it in an exam centre or whatever. So it can be.
You look at, if you want to, I can see issues with the practical elements because they're still going to be there. If you apply to a centre, you've got your travel costs and everything else, and that's only, even if it's only for a day, can be a considerable amount of money. So, again, I just think that this is the way things do it. And if you want to do it on a Saturday afternoon, you're not fixed, you can do it. It's good.
Yeah. But then again, I wonder how much of the requirement of our practical exams, and I think their practicals are good, and I wouldn't like to see them dropped, but I think that the practicals have been set up by the concept in the UK have been set up by the people that have put the exam together and not necessarily by Ofcom. So if, in the States, there's no practicals, is there, Bill?
No. And we could spend way too much time debating whether there should be or not, because from a certain safety point of view, I see the value in having a practical exam to make sure you don't hurt yourself or others. But just, rolling back here slightly, the states would be incredibly easy. Our pools are known. We know the questions. They're published. We can just load them in a learning management system. We do this at work all the time. And, you got to have X amount of questions from each, banks of questions, and it randomizes them. It randomizes the answers, and bang, you're done. Here's your test. And we even have it to the point now where we have 2 levels of security, just not really security. Hey, that's a bad word. We have 2 levels of restrictions as you're taking an exam. One is that we can put you in something called a lockdown browser so that you can't go Google the answers. The other one we actually have for really high stakes testing. We have a service where you schedule your exam to take online, and then you turn on your web camera and you meet the person at the other end who watches you take the exam to make sure you're not opening up textbooks or that kind of stuff, if that's really important. But so I think just ignoring that stuff for a second, just with the question pool published, it's very, very, very inexpensive to drop this into a person or a person view, or I'm trying to remember the other very popular computer testing group that I've gone through before, and just, get that part out and going and away things go. But there's a lot of, I mean, the thing that I like the best about in-person testing here is it's the local clubs that do it. So you meet the local clubs. So if we do an online testing, you lose that piece altogether.
Yeah, but in the UK, the local clubs potentially could be doing the online testing as well. So it doesn't, as you say, if it's a application that effectively you install an app on your computer, it locks your computer down into just becoming effectively a dumb terminal onto that app. And so you can't jump out to Google or something like that. Then
Bill raises a valid point about using the local club network affiliated to the, national organization, coordinating the local exams. That's exactly how I got into Sutton and Cheam Radio Club. I got wind of a foundation course going on. I went down to the course, to the club, met Martin and everybody else. They put on a 2-day weekend event, and then you sat the exam. Had it been a remote course where I could have logged on, looked at notes, done the learning at home, and then logged into a remote system, however it was validated, lockdown browser, whatever, done the test that way, I wouldn't have had the connection with the club and the Elmering and all that kind of stuff that comes out of it. That's a spinoff.
But going back to the other story, Martin, about 291 people taking the radio examination, that's an awful lot of people. And they must have put an awful lot of effort to get that many taking the exam.
Yeah, awful lot of people. So it proves amateur radio is still alive and kicking in most parts of the world. And if they have to renew every year, that's not much different to what you and I used to have to do a few years ago, is it, Leslie? We used to have to renew every year.
My first license was about 8 pages. And I think the guidance notes now are about 50 pages.
Yeah, and we had to renew them every year, and you had to pay for it every year.
Oh, yes. I think it was £15 at the time. Was it £8 or £15?
15.
Okay.
Every year. And you had a separate licensing book for each of the licenses, which was far, far easier to understand the licensing requirements than it all rolled into one at the moment. But that's another story.
Yeah, we digress slightly.
We have. We got off at a tangent. Okay. This year, 80 young people, 80 young hams, are going to attend the YOTA event in South Africa. Now, if this is anything like what happened in the UK last year, which Martin Rothwell and myself covered for the ICQ podcast, it's going to be an absolute brilliant time for these youngsters. 34 countries, youngsters between 16 and 25 from 34 countries going to South Africa, middle of August, to play radio. What could be better than that? Leslie, do you want to go first?
Well, I've been to South Africa, and it's, how can I put it? It's a great, great experience. Was that, you were talking about last year, was that the one at Gilwell Park, Martin?
Certainly was. We were up there, Martin and I, for a day, and I'd love to have spent the week there.
Well, if they do a similar thing over in South Africa, which, they're going to do, that's going to be a humdinger, and it's going to be so memorable for them. I just wish them all the best.
Yeah, and I think that, every year it gets better because people learn from the previous one. So yeah, it should be fun. Edmund, your thoughts on this one?
Youngsters on the air, yes, superb. I wish I was a little bit younger, then I'd be very tempted myself, but I wish them all the best, and I echo your comments there, Martin, about the Gilwell Park edition in the UK in 2017. That was I didn't take part in that and visit, but I certainly worked them on the air. So if you hear them on the air, then please do take the time and trouble to give them a QSO. And the operators, I heard, set very high standards last year, so I'm sure they will in 2018 as well.
Yeah. Matthew, we were talking about the Germans, and they were very, very enthusiastic in 2017, but I bet they don't cycle all the way to South Africa this time.
There was some very memorable 2 German hams that had made the traverse from Germany to the UK on bicycles. And, they had trailers behind their bicycles. They were fully committed to the sport of cycling, but also they were completely mobile, radio ready. I remember one had a CW set, I think, on the handlebars. The other was, doing data modes or something. APRS, I think one of them had an HF antenna or some sort of, of that size on the back of their thing. Martin and I were joking that they wouldn't make the effort to go all the way down on the bikes to South Africa, but you never know. Those guys were, confirmed diehard cyclists, so maybe they'll try.
Yeah, maybe they will. And as I say, there was a lot of young people when we were there, very, very enthusiastic. Bill, so, YOTA hasn't really made it your side of the pond yet, has it? But
no,
I'm hoping it will one day.
Yeah, it would be really nice if we had a Region 2 youngsters on the air. That would be really groovy. One of the people that we're going to talk about in a later article, I believe, was talking about it in the past, Sterling Coffee. But this one, is the call sign of the event going to be ZS9 YOTA? Is that going to be the special event call?
I think so. That's what I've seen on the site, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to happen here in the beginning of August, so keep an ears out for that one.
Yeah, and as I say, it'll be a whole lot of fun, I'm sure. And as I say, it's always good for the hobby, and it certainly generates a hell of a lot of good friendship. Moving on to our next news story, and I'm sure our fellow podcaster, Mr. Martin Rothwell, will love this one to bits. The BBC to shelve FM switch-off plan. And the Daily Mail...
I can hear his mind just gashing now,
Oh, he'll be happy as a... in doodah. No, it's... that was almost blew our clean rating. No, the Daily Mail reports that the BBC has cancelled plans to switch off FM radio broadcasts. And we've talked very much about the licensing Ofcom wanting us to move to DAB, which is up around where you guys in the States have your 1.25 meter band. So we've got DAB here, so we'd never get 1.25 meters. But Martin is very hateful about DAB, and I think it's a technology that isn't going to make it. Bill, what do you think?
It's good that they reconsidered it at this point. Yeah, we have no experience here with DAB. Our 220 megahertz band got trimmed. That had to have been back in the 90s because they needed it for railway signaling or something like that. I vaguely remember. It's been a long, long time. But we used to have packet radio forward stations on we call it 220 megahertz here, and it was a band between 2 meters and 440, and it was had a little bit better range than 440, a little bit worse range than 2 meters. But this article here is that they're keeping the FM radio broadcast in, and I think a lot of people are going to be very happy about that, especially the ones that have older cars.
Yeah, and there's a lot of FM receivers around still, a hell of a lot. It's a lot of legacy stuff. So yeah, I think that is a good news. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts? Well, I've heard unkind people call it dead and buried radio. It either works or it doesn't, and that's the problem. If it doesn't work, it's next to useless. If it works, it's fine. It's technology changing, and it changes, and some things work and some things don't. But what I think happened is they put all their eggs in one basket. Yeah, this is what we're going to do. And sometimes sometimes you got to make a decision where you got to go, but you got to also see how other things, was this fully ready? And I don't think it was at the time. That's just my take on it.
Yeah. It's one of those interesting technologies that I think we've talked about this many times, and I think Martin was the instigator of the dead and buried on this podcast. But if he wasn't, Martin, I apologise for blaming you for it. But no, it is a good one to potentially see the end of. Edmund, you've done a bit of broadcasting when you was at college, and I know you also listen a fair bit. What's your thoughts?
Well, DAB is an old technology now. I'm pretty sure that I remember hearing a news bulletin when I was still at sixth form college, so that would place it somewhere around 1994, 95, 96. I heard a news bulletin that the BBC had switched on their first experimental DAB transmitter in London. So that's 20 plus years ago, isn't it? If I've got the date right. For me, my biggest truck with DAB is the sound quality. I'm not a particularly demanding audiophile. You know, I'm not a hi-fi purist in the way that some people are, but even I can hear how bad some music can sound on DAB. And I think I've said this before. When it started, the platform carried relatively few stations, but at phenomenally high bit rates and with lots of forward error correction, or whatever the correct term is, built in. So it was probably quite robust. In the years and decades since then, a commercial decision has been taken to sacrifice sound quality and possibly robustness at the altar of quantity, having more stations, as I understand it. So sound quality is the big one. A decent, to my ears anyway, a decent stereo, relatively hiss-free FM signal will wipe the floor with the DAB equivalent. So that's the first problem. Second problem, as I think Leslie already touched on, you have the cliff edge effect, whereas FM just fades away nicely. And where I am here in Sussex on the south coast, there aren't that many big hills nearby. We're not a particularly hilly part of the world compared to somewhere like, I don't know, Wales or the Lake District or various bits of Scotland. From where I'm sitting now, there are a couple of hills, small hills, that are, I don't know, 5-10 miles away, that if I drive up them or if I go down the other side, DAB will cut out on my car radio and it is unusable. And okay, maybe I've just got a not particularly good DAB radio in my car, but once it loses the signal, it seems to take an awful long time to lock onto it again. I can drive a quarter of a mile or more possibly. If I lose the audio, I'm not going to lose it just for 100 yards or so. It's a serious distance. So for that reason as well, I'm very pleased that FM is being kept. And finally, I hope it might encourage some stations to reintroduce what used to be quite popular in this part of the world anyway, which was split programming. So, for example, not that many years ago, the local BBC station, BBC Radio Solent, would split their network between FM and their medium wave transmitters. So if one of the major South Coast clubs were playing in a football match, they would put the commentary on FM, and the regular programme that would be going out on FM, were the football not happening, would be broadcast on medium wave. So you had a choice of listening if you were in the area. That seems to have died out a bit in recent years. If FM is being kept, then maybe they could do the equivalent thing with the main service being carried on DAB and FM being used for opt-outs.
Yeah, well, that's an option. Matthew, we've left you to last on this one. What do you think?
Okay. So the UK has done the prudent thing. The take-up of DAB is not been overwhelming. It's still not 50% of the listeners or whatever the threshold is. I think it's 50% of consumers have to have a DAB radio before they consider a transition period. That hasn't been happening. You compare us to Norway. Norway has decommissioned or is finally switching off all FM transmitters in the country, and you have DAB or nothing really, or internet or whatever. But yeah, and that's fine for Norway. Good for them. They're clear. Their embracement of, or their ability to take on new technology, and listening to Edmund, I put finger quotes in the air talking of DAB as being new technology because it's been around for 20 years or more. But in the UK, our demographics or our consumerism or whatever it is, it's just not taking off here. We are moving straight to internet mediums and other sources rather than
apps. Downloading via an app.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's on the phone. Yeah. And maybe it's a generational thing. I mentioned demographics. The older people will want to have radios, and the younger will want to have the app or the phone or whatever it is. So I don't see. I think it's right that they don't foist it upon the country. They don't push it and say it's some sort of governmental policy to make it happen, and that we have a changeover. So they're listening to the pace of change, and it's clearly not happening. And we are now in a mixed economy. I think the key phrase that I read in most articles on this topic are we live in a mixed media economy where people are consuming radio in different ways. Sure, good. I
think the phrase they used was hybrid.
Yeah, well, whatever. But 2 points that listening to the experts on this podcast discussing DAB, 2 things that I've noticed. One is DAB sets are still not prohibitively expensive, but they seem to be disproportionately expensive to an FM or AM FM radio. And I'm okay. They're not, maybe they're £20, £30 for the bottom of the range DAB kind of set. But if this is about digital, and this is about basically churning out little black IC chips inside a radio to mass produce these, can they not reduce the price because it's a complex product to build? Or is it that they just don't see the demand to invest in the mass production? I don't know what it is that's stopping the price falling, but I would expect DAB radios. I've looked to buy one, and I'm always sort of scouring the discount shelves of my local supermarket, believe it or not, because they sell a radio every now and then, and I think, oh, it's £8. I'll try it. I've never used a DAB radio, but I'll try it. And then you discover, no, actually, it's still £38. I was looking at the frying pan price, not the so I got hoodwinked at the checkout. I'll put it back. I don't want it at that price. So one is the cost, which I think is related to the way the UK is adopting the technology. And there are other things. We're a nation of car lovers, and most cars don't have a DAB radio, and blah 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 blah. I think the other, and it's an open question, and maybe Edmund has more information. You talk about the quality of the signal, DAB versus FM, or good FM signal versus standard DAB, whatever. Is there a way to simultaneously experience the two? If I bought a cheap DAB radio or a radio, are there stations that simultaneously broadcast FM and DAB so I can switch one on and switch one off and hear the difference?
Yes, many. Classic FM deliberately put a delay on their FM signal, I think, so that the two are exactly in sync. But other radio stations, for example, radios 1 to 4, transmit on FM and DAB. As do the BBC locals and many independent commercial stations. And if you want to get a cheap DAB radio, go to a car boot sale. My wife loves car boot sales. I've been to more of them in the last couple of years since I've known her than I have in the whole of the rest of my life put together. And it is very, very rare that you will walk around a car boot sale and not see at least one DAB radio on sale. And normally they're on sale for not very much money at all. So perhaps you could infer something from that if you were so minded.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Okay. Try before I buy. If I make a cheap investment, I could get a radio somewhere, local sale, boot sale. I could do a comparison and judge by the quality. And of course, depending on my location in the country, right? I don't know where I am relative to a DAB signal. I might suffer from the dropout. I might explore that to see what it's like and reserve my opinion. But it seems that for now, the invested business around DAB has to wait a little while longer. I would guess another 5 years, 10 years before there's a confirmed switch-off period in the UK.
If at all, Matt, because if the BBC shelved it, then a lot of radio stations will probably follow the BBC.
Yeah.
Moving on, I'm going to go straight to our last news story here. Young Radio Amateur Club launched, and Sterling Coffee,
Good on them.
Yeah, N0SCC has announced the launch of a new radio club made by youths for youth, and that's good. That to me means that our hobby is still alive, vibrant, people want to do it, and effectively, instead of having older people like myself setting something up for youngsters to do, the youngsters are doing it for themselves, and that really brings it back to me as being good. Bill, you listen to some of the stuff this young man Sterling does. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, Sterling and Marty's KC1CWF. They do a podcast every once in a while called The Phasing Line. I like listening to it. I tell everyone that runs a podcast I like to listen to them. They're not as good as ours, but I like to listen to them. But the whole idea that him and a few other guys got together, maybe not just guys. I have to relook at their website here. And yeah, David, Ben, and Sterling got together and started up a radio club. They have a Discord channel. Does anyone know what that is? Okay. Discord is a VoIP /chat / online thing that's rather popular this week with folks that do online gaming. And they have a Young Hams group out on that system as well. And so far, I just haven't seen much of the little bit I poked around out there. But it's just exactly what Martin says. It's great. They got involved. They're making a club. Go, guys.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%, Bill. I really think that the important thing is that people are doing it for themselves now. They're not sitting back waiting. Leslie, your thoughts?
Well, I just think it's absolutely great. Yeah, you know what? They're going to make some mistakes. We all do, starting up new clubs, and they're going to try things. Some things won't work. That happens. Some things will work, and some things will work fantastically. But the thing is, they've got a clean sheet of paper that they can try things. You haven't got old fuddy-duddies saying, no, that's not going to work. Actually, they can try things. And that's the most important thing to me, and it's not really for themselves. It's for the hobby that, the hobby benefits from this. That's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. Matthew, your thoughts?
Well, not much to add apart from I love the title page of their website. So if you go to yarc.world, WORLD, you'll be confronted with a very bold statement, an amateur radio club for those who don't remember the Cold War. Therein is the lesson. I mean, if that's the criteria, that's the benchmark, right, guys? So,
okay.
I like it. I really like it. And it's a young club. It's only been around a couple of months or 6 months or something. I just quickly read the About Us tab, compulsory About Us tab on websites. And yeah, it's just they recognize there wasn't really a focal point for the latent young ham activity that they saw in the local area. I think it's kind of started. I mentioned Long Island, New York, so Hyde and Long Island. I hope it just flourishes. I hope it takes off, and they'll try things as Leslie was saying. They'll try things. Some things will work out. Some things will just develop and take a life of their own. So, just more radio. That's what we like. Well done.
Yep, more radio we all agree with. What do you think, Edmund?
Well, I can remember the Cold War, so I'm not eligible to become involved in this, although I suppose some people might say the the Cold War never really finished, and these days maybe we've got a hot peace instead. But anyway, leaving that aside, yes, the UK's got a similar group, the Young Hamsters, I believe, who've got a presence on Twitter. But this new organisation here are not only on Twitter, they've also got a rather nice website, as has already been mentioned. And I just echo what other people have said, really, and wish them well with their ventures.
Yeah, so, well, as Edmund said, we wish you well, guys, and I think it's the future of our hobby going forward, and keep up the good work. Right, guys, well, that finishes our news roundtable. Quick now wander around our table here, our virtual table, find out what you've all been up to. Let's go on, Leslie, you go first.
Oh, no, I thought you were going to say that. Right, what have I been up to? Well, first of all, I've been doing my other hobby, which did involve a bit of radio. That was at a beer festival in Brighton. So I was there and I met the lovely Fiona Snoop from Hound Dog Radio. And we were doing bits and pieces. Anyway, that's one thing we were doing. That lasted 4 days. And the other thing that I've been doing is... unfortunately, this shack is a bit like Batterdy's Dog's Home for radios. I've actually had another radio turn up on my bench, another UHF handheld, an F4002, and I've been playing about with programming that. So that's what we've been doing the last sort of 4 weeks or so, just messing about really, and that's where we are.
Well, that sounds good to me, Leslie. Sounds good to me. Edmund, yourself, what you been up to?
Well, I mentioned earlier Exercise Blue Ham on the 5 megahertz 60 metre band here in the UK, where the Air Cadets were on the air in force, actually, particularly on the Sunday. And if you worked enough of them, you can apply for an email certificate. And I was very pleased to hear that the operating standards were very high this time round, not only from the Air Cadets themselves, but also from the amateurs, because there have been previous editions of this where amateur stations have come up and they've used non-standard phonetics, which has really confused some of the young Air Cadets, where they've used amateur radio jargon that the cadets are not familiar with, and where they've on occasion gone into full-on amateur ragtube extended play waffle mode, bit like I do on 2 meters, that kind of thing. This time, however, I personally witnessed very little of that, and almost all of the amateur stations seemed to be aware of the exercise and knew what it was about and knew what it was for, which certainly wasn't the case in the past. So I think it was probably the best Exercise Blue Ham yet. They'll probably do another one later in the year, and anybody in the UK or beyond who is equipped for 5 megs, both antenna-wise and licensing-wise, I would really encourage you to take part. Yeah. So that was a couple of weeks back, and then last Saturday I visited a big boat.
She's a ship, Edmund. She's a ship.
All right, I visited some displacement tug moored in the Thames and saw some nice radio amateurs, so that was fun.
I think you're going to get into serious trouble if you ever got there again.
I did like your video tour of the antennas, by the way, Edmund. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I did a shortish video which is uploaded to YouTube. One of the first that I've ever shot in full HD, because I won myself a semi-decent camera on eBay, and a fair chunk of that video is dedicated to the HF antennas, because the ship in question is the mighty HMS Belfast, and there's a special event station going on from there at the moment, predominantly on HF, but with some minor local activity on the 2 meter band, which I was responsible for to a large extent on the Saturday that I visited. And it occurred to me that many people who've worked the special event station will have the signals will have passed through those antennas they've got, and so I thought that would be a good thing to put in the video.
Yeah. Well, as I say, you did join us on HMS Belfast on Saturday, and you had a great fun. I know you did, because you worked a hell of a lot of VHF stations. In fact, the VHF station was busier than the HF and the FT8 station.
Yes, it was like a rugby score, wasn't it? 2 meters FM 34, HF voice 25. Get in.
Yeah, there you go. But it was a good day was had. Bill, what have you been up to?
Quite a bit as I look down through my list of things. I started getting in a habit of just jotting down notes on a Post-it note. Just so I know what to talk about. But last time I talked about the BARC British Amateur Radio Telegroups contest that happened here in March. I only got to spend about 3 or 4 hours in that contest, so I got to enter in the 6 hours or less category. I did make 39 QSOs. I did change some things up in N1 MM Plus, where I used two-tone and tiny FSK the whole time instead of my normal things I was doing. And it went very, very well. Still needed multiple decoders for, busy band conditions. But the tiny FSK went well. That whole thing about the recent resurgence of people using tiny FSKs is because of a RTTY listserv huge conversation that's been going on about jitter in the signals, which led to someone's coming out with something called Mortty, MORRTTY. It's basically a tiny FSK kit that they're going to eventually sell so that people don't have to roll their own like I did. So that's kind of exciting that that's coming out. That's super, super, super new news, because that's, 1 o'clock today is when that rolled across the RTTY list. Other things I was doing is I did speak at the BloomCon, our local campus information security conference that we have. This is the 3rd year. And instead of, talking about advanced persistent threats or Russian hacking like I did in the last couple of years, this time around I talked about ham radio, because a lot of these folks, had no awareness of the hobby, and they're working with wireless and security and that kind of stuff. And it may be related, may not. So I did a half-hour talk on that just to kind of give a general awareness, very high-level kind of stuff. Another thing I did, according to my little notes here, is APRS on 30 meters. So I tried with a couple nights with PSK 63 and MFSK 4. Didn't hear much. I did get some 300 baud packet APRS messages on 30 meters. The whole thing sounds like witchcraft to me. That's just my general, consensus about it. But I'll keep at it when I get a few other nights to try. But I was using APRS messenger with the UZ7HO sound modem. They give me the 30 meter, software set that I used for this APRS stuff. FT8, they have a test version out, number 3 of the 1.9, specifically for the de-expedition mode. So they're encoding a special de-expedition mode into FT8. They're going to do another test on April 7th from 1400 to 1600 UTC on 14.105. More details are in the FT8 group on Facebook. And the day after we recorded, we had a windstorm, and my 160 meter, currently it's back to a G5 RV configuration, snapped at the center. So I did a temporary fix where I used a putty knife as a center conductor, because I didn't find anything. And until I get to a show, Hamfest, or a rally, I made a temporary middle connector out of the putty knife just to get me back on the air with that antenna. So the list is bigger than I thought, but that's why I started keeping a list by the little Post-it note by the monitor, just to jot stuff down.
Yeah, so it does sound like you've been busy, Bill, and working out a way of getting your 160 back on the air. He's always proves we're all amateurs, and we all sort of, how can I repair that? We go through that a lot. Matthew, what you been up to?
Yeah. So, well, I always seem to make excuses when I come on the show and explain I haven't been here because I was busy with work. Maybe I've been to a few countries since I last talked. So I've traveled for my job to Austria, Spain. I had 2 days in New York City, which was great. It was a long transatlantic flight, and then came straight back. Even made it to Andorra, my first time in Andorra, which is right between Spain and France. It's a little principality, have their own borders and everything, and Poland. So been doing my air miles, getting my time in, and on those plane travels and hotels, I get a lot of time to read, so or check out YouTube, and so I've been dipping into websites like Mr. Carlson's Lab and Alan Wolk, W2AEW. To keep my hand in on the amateur hobby, or reading the local publications, Practical Wireless and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Radcom. Actually, when I set up the laptop today for the Skype call which we're recording right now, I realized I couldn't actually even get to my desk. It was covered in projects that I'd been doing in the preceding couple of weeks, primarily around printed circuit boards and doing more with solder mask techniques, trying to make it more consistent and not so artistic, and being a bit more process driven, which is always a challenge with this sort of UV cured mask paint process. And I'm actually in the process of trying to work more with designing boards that are a little more intelligently laid out. So I'm still using my favorite software, which is called DipTrace. Big plug for DipTrace. I think it's a fantastic application. And trying to build board designs that enable single side soldering. So all the component pieces I use, I don't use SMDs, but I use through-hole components. But having them all soldered on one side. But I do use two-sided printed circuit board design. So I have a top layer and a bottom layer to enable traces to be laid out. But then if all your components are soldered on one side, you need to obviously kind of typically have a lot of vias, a lot of through-hole vias that you need to map one side of the board to the other. And one of the techniques I've been trying is to use PCB rivets. These are tiny, tiny rivets. If you think of the inner diameter of a through-hole component is about 0.8 millimeters, you get an idea of the size of these rivets. I'm drilling holes in the boards that are about 1 mil in diameter, dropping in a tiny rivet, which is maybe 2 millimeters in total length, and then mashing it down so I have a rivet head on both sides, and then soldering it and creating vias. And I'm playing with stuff, DIY. And yeah, we mentioned the big boat. So I was part of the crew on board the Bridge Wireless office at HMS Belfast last weekend, where I finally met Edmund for the first time in the flesh. And that was one of the high points. And I was involved on the DX HF desk, position 1, and was chasing the VHF team with only 25 QSOs to his 34. Congratulations, Edmund. Not that it was a competition or anything. The slight challenge of DX on that weekend was the CQ Worldwide WPX contest, which was on this. So the bands were very active on 20 and certainly on 20 meters and a little bit on 40. But since we're a special event station, we're not a contesting station. It was a bit of a challenge to find a spot, call out CQ, and not get hammered with contest calls. So we did reasonably well. I had a great time. And what I thought, again, spending time on HMS Belfast, being able to work in a historic place, a floating museum, meeting the public, explaining the hobby, giving out more certificates to anyone, the kids and some of the parents. Being in a room, it's very rare for me to work with other operators. So being in a room where behind me there was another station with Edmund and another station working FT8 as well, it was a great buzz. And so it was a fantastic day. But that's about it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Okay. Well, very quickly. Yeah, I was on board HMS Belfast with the guys. Chris Howard was there with Matthew and Edmund, and myself, and Martin Rothwell was there. So there was actually 50% of the ICQ podcast presenters on board. Ed, DD5LP, called in and got himself in the log on the HF, so that was good. Edmund did actually work a couple of stations on the HF, and I believe one was in French and one was in German, so the guys were quite impressed with you flipping languages on them, Edward, and they were quite impressed with that, but that worked very well.
I can't really speak German particularly well. It maybe sounds impressive if you just learn a couple of sentences, but it's not really a great endeavour. And I've said before, and I'll say again, that if you have a go at speaking foreign languages on the air, even if you make the biggest hash of it that anybody has ever made, people will normally be more than happy to meet you halfway. And I've spoken to Germans and French people who have said quite specifically that the only reason they were prepared to press the PTT button and actually talk to me was because I was having a go in their language. If I'd stayed purely in English, yes, they could hear me 5 and 9, but I would never have heard them because they felt their English wasn't good enough that they were brave enough to press the button and transmit. So I encourage you all to have a go. If you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. The main thing is to try.
Even if you can say 73 in that foreign language or whatever it is, German or Spanish or whatever, it's that attempt, and you can always have a rubber stamp QSO 59 and thank you, goodbye. But slowly but surely you'll add one or two extra verbs or numbers into your conversation, and it just helps break down barriers. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
could I also, just one last thing, and then I promise I'll be quiet. Can I just say quickly hello to Ian Golf 4 Juliet Mike, who I gather is an ICQ podcast listener. He saw the Facebook entry that Chris Howard sent out from the HMS Belfast, where Chris mentioned that we were on 40 metres, but also on 2 metres. And having read that, Ian, who is in range on 2 metres, deliberately went out of his way to put together a very hastily assembled 2 metre station that involved a quarter wave mobile whip sitting in his window, which is exactly the kind of thing that I would do in a circumstance like that. So he put something together specially and he worked us without any trouble at all. So I've said this again in the past about 2 metres primarily, but it holds true for every other band as well. If there's not much activity on there, number one, creates some, and number two, activity begets activity. If you are there and people know you're there, then some people will go even as far as cobbling together a station specially just to talk to you. So I'd like to say, and thank you very much, Ian, if you're listening to this, for going to that effort. And also, if there were any other ICQ podcast listeners who I spoke to on 2 metres without me realising it, then I'm really sorry I didn't realise, and thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be there.
Yeah, I agree with all that you said there, Edmund. Couple of last things. Like Matthew, I watched both those YouTube channels fairly regular, Alan Wolf's one and Mr. Carlson's Lab. And as I say, Paul, if you ever were a listener, I hate you. No, I don't really. The guy is younger than me, more talented than me, and he's got a far better workshop. But yeah, I jest when I say I hate you. You're a very talented guy and very interesting to watch. Have had my scanner still scanning the satellites, but I can't keep the squelch open while it's scanning, so I don't hear a tremendous amount. However, yesterday I heard the ISS go over, and there was an astronaut talking to somebody on the ground, an amateur, so I was quite pleased with that. But my last thing that I'm half struggling with a little bit, about 3 years ago I was a PMR engineer, and Martin Rothwell's been given a Hytera PD705 LT, which is the light version, and unfortunately it's got a password in it. Now, we don't know what the password is. I am sure that I cracked the password when I worked at the dealership, but all these things are slowly coming back to me. Now, we can't get into this one. There's people saying, oh, you can upgrade them. But from my memory, the light version, the LT version, was never upgradable. So you can't upgrade the firmware. So the thing of upgrade the firmware and you can do it doesn't work. And the password is numerical, but it can be between 1 and 8 characters. And we've thought about setting an Arduino up to keep firing off numbers, but once you put 3 passwords in, it drops back to asking you to push other buttons to get to that screen. So if anybody knows how to get into a Hytera PD705 LT, please contact me. I thought I did years ago. But I've obviously managed to break into the PD705, but the light one seems to be eluding me at the moment, basically because I think it's got different firmware. And I'm doing it for legitimate reasons. I'm not trying to be naughty. So that's what I've been up to. So all in all, I think we've run long, but we've had a good natter, guys. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
It's been a blast, Martin. Really enjoyed it tonight.
I thought you had, and it's always enjoyable to have you with us, Leslie. Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Good to have you, Edmund.
Yeah, many thanks for having me, Martin.
No problems. Matthew Nassar, M0NJX.
Oh, thanks for having me as well.
Yeah, good one, mate. And Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX from the States. Good to have you on board.
Yes, thank you very much. And if I remember my French, Edmund, mille salutations. That's bad French.
Same to you.
Right. Well, I'm lost on that one. So I'll save the 73s, guys, and we'll catch you again soon.
Cheerio. Bye.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Now it's time for the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY, and I'm delighted to pass on some news given by us by a friend of the show, Frank Howe, who you may remember from previous episodes, and he's asked us to let you guys know about the Fox Mike Hotel Portable Ops team. They'll be activating in Asquina County in Mississippi and Sharkey County in Mississippi from the 7th to the 8th of April as part of the MSQSL party. The team will include Frank Howe, K4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Thomas November 5 Whiskey Delta Golf, Glenn Kilo Whiskey 5 Golf Papa, and Terry Alpha Charlie 5 Yankee Lima. They plan to be in Marysville, Mississippi from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. local time, Rolling Fork, Mississippi. This is a Shark area from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. where the party ends. They plan to operate SSB and probably some FT8 depending upon the band conditions, with phone power from 100 watts to 500 watts with 2 phone stations operating all under the K4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel call sign. There are no licensed amateurs in Asquina and only 12 in Sharkey, making both exceptionally rare counties for DX entries. So certainly if you're working the 2018 ARRL Grid Square contest, certainly worthwhile keeping your ear out for Frank and his team and what they're doing there. We'll obviously put a link to a page with more information for you. But good luck to Frank and the team, and I hope you work a load of contacts on your event there. Got alerted to a news story here by Phil, Golf 6 Delta Lima Juliet. They said something we might be interested in. CQ Wires has added a live audio feed on YouTube for checking your D-Star, C4 FM and Phoenix DMR audio. And it's also a handy for non-digital users who would like a flavour of what digital radio comms is like. So certainly, I say worth mentioning there. Phil, thanks a lot for letting us know. And we'll put a link to this on the ICQ podcast website, as always, for you guys to check out and see if that's any use for you. New product time as well. SOTA Beams have released a Powerpole adapter for the FT817818. And saying this is obviously based upon the fact that the FT817 is one of the most popular HF radios ever made, but they've identified a weakness in particular with the DC power socket is prone to failure. So SOTA Beams are now stocking a little adapter that removes the strain from the power socket and converts it to a handy Powerpole connector. So again, we'll pop link on the ICQ podcast website, and anyone with an FT818 who suffers with this minor problem can certainly check that out, and hopefully that maybe solves the problem for you. Well, now we head over to our features episode with operating GB80GGCN. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. For this episode, I'd like to talk about the day out half the ICQ podcast team had on HMS Belfast. Now, HMS Belfast is a special event ship, a museum ship in her own right, normally operates as GB2RN, or as the guys for the Royal Navy like to say, Great Britain 2 Royal Navy. And not the correct phonetics, I know, but when anybody writes to me. For this few weeks, the ship has got a different call sign. It's GB80 Golf Charlie November. Now, why that call sign? Well, the special event call sign was issued because HMS Belfast is 80 years old. So that's hence the 80. And the Golf Charlie November was HMS Belfast's original call sign. So that's why we're... Now, it's not often we get large numbers of the ICQ podcast team together, and when we do, we often have fun. So hopefully you'll enjoy what you hear today, and one day, with a bit of luck and probably a lottery win, we'll manage to get the whole of the ICQ podcast team in one place at the same time. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. The first interview is with Lee, one of the yeomen who often walks around parties round and explaining what's going on. I'm with Lee, one of the yeomen on HMS Belfast. Good afternoon, Lee.
Good afternoon.
Lee, one of your jobs is telling people about the history of the Belfast. Can you give us a brief overview for us, our listeners, please?
Yeah, certainly. She was, she is a town class light cruiser. With 6-inch guns. She was laid down in Harlenden Wharf in Belfast in 1936, launched in 1938, commissioned into the Royal Navy into the 2nd Cruiser Squadron in 1939. She was paid off into the reserve in 1963, became a accommodation ship in 1967, then towed down to Fareham Creek in 1971, where she was going to be broken up and scrapped. The Imperial War Museum stepped in and saved the ship. She was brought to the Port of London in 1971, where she is now, where she remains.
Yeah, and I believe this year is her 80th anniversary of when she was first launched, isn't it, Lee?
Yeah, that's correct. We had that last Friday, which was St Patrick's Day, and we had some veterans on board. The oldest, I do believe, was 104, John Harrison, who was actually an ordnance officer on the ship on its first commission in 1939. So that was pretty moving and quite a special day for us all.
I mean, I've met some of the old boys that have turned up in the radio room, not going back as far as that, and in their sort of 70s, and they got a lot of interesting things to say. This is a really interesting ship. We're based in the centre of London, and if our listeners ever get over, please come on board and have a look. I believe she wasn't all good luck, was she? She got mined in the first year of her life, wasn't it, and almost written off.
Yeah, she was only at sea for 3 months when she was actually mined in the Firth of Forth in Scotland. and which kept her out of the war for the best part of 2 years. So she didn't actually return, get back into the war until 1943. From then, she went straight onto the Arctic convoys.
Yeah. And I've seen some horrible pictures of the Arctic convoys where the poor guys are chopping the snow off of the and ice off the railings with the fire axes. That you had to be a different breed in them days, didn't you, Lee?
Yeah, it was, as Churchill, I think, referred to it, it was the hardest job in the world at the time. Yeah, the temperatures up to, I think it was minus 29, minus 30, 4-hour watches, stories from veterans of, coming down from watch and removing your duffel coats, and they literally stood up on their own. They were so frozen. Waves, 60-foot waves, very cramped and very wet. But that was the Arctic convoys here.
So, we've been here since the 70s, and, well worth a visit. There's been a lot of work going on recently to improve her. I know she had masts a few years ago, and the funnels are being redone. So, I think she'll be around a lot longer.
Well, hopefully so, yes. And she's due to go down to have the hull scraped and looked at in dry dock in a few years' time. They've had a look at the hull at the moment, and it's in pretty good nick. Yeah, there is a lot of conservation work going on. The GDP's being redone. The boat deck's going to have a lot of work done to it. The funnels were done last year, and the Russians actually paid for the mast, and they actually did the mast a few years back now.
Yeah, so all in all, very good. And as I say, we'll let our listeners know when she goes into dry dock to have the underside looked at for real. But up until then, I think she's well worth a visit.
Oh, indeed, yeah. There's loads to see. There's 9 decks to explore. There's plenty of things to do and things to look at. Yeah, she's getting improved all the time.
In the Radio Shack here at HMS Belfast, I've got Tim with me, and Tim, you're a G4, and I'm trying to remember the last bit.
YBU.
What G4 YBU, and I've got Neil M0ZEY right, with us. You guys are playing FT8 here. You seem to be doing quite well. How's it going, Tim?
We've had quite an interesting day, really, so far. We've got sort of a page of logbook done. I suppose that's about 20-ish QSOs, maybe a few more. All across Europe, quite a lot into Russia. We've had a bit over to the States and Canada, and a lot of Russians, actually. Yeah, quite interesting just to see how that propagation sort of is very strong in certain areas. So we've been limited to 20 metres because of the other stations that are on the air from the shack here. So when we were listening on 15 metres, we were copying VK into Indonesia. So there's definitely good propagation there. And the nice thing is that when you're doing FT8, you can have a real conversation with your mates next door and have a chat and greet the visitors and all that stuff, as well as play radio. So you can multitask properly. In fact, at home, I go and do some cooking when I've got this thing going.
Well, there you go, Tim. And we do have a chat, don't we, Neil? Where's a group?
Oh, yeah, we do. We haven't stopped talking. Yeah. I mean, it's been interesting because this is the first time I've never seen this WSJT software before. I've always been interested in trying to set it up but never had the time. So it's nice to sit and see someone that knows how to work it. So I've learned a lot today. And it's been really busy in here. I don't think I've ever seen so many people in here before. There's 8 of us today. And we're actually doing quite a bit of radio, which makes a change instead of just tea drinking.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, I think there's 50% of the ICQ podcast presenters are here today, plus others, you guys, and we are having fun. So I think we're all pretty much from the Sutton and Cheam Club, apart from Edmund, and we'll let him off because he's an honorary member of the club. But all's going well. It does look interesting, this FT8.
It's a fascinating mode. I think for me, there's a lot of controversy about, is it the way to go? And for me, it's just another mode. It's not the only mode, but it does show you when propagation comes through. You can see, like Whisper, you can see sort of clusters of possible contacts as propagation changes and shifts, and it's a fascinating mode from that point of view. So yeah, I think there's definitely a different facet to amateur radio, which is just what it's all about, be it satellites, be it vintage stuff, be it the latest stuff, or be it rag chews on on HF or VHF. There's just something for everybody in this hobby. I think that's the wonderful thing, and for yourself as well, as your interests change, you know, there's something else to go and pursue.
Certainly is, and you mentioned satellites, which is a salt on my wound because I've got to do it before July, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer.
You've got the aerial, Martin.
I got the aerial. I got the radio. It's too cold, Neil. Right, guys. Thanks for your time on that one. I'm with Chris M0TCH and Martin M0SGL here on the Belfast on this day when pretty much all of us, or half the team, are up here. What sort of things you've been up to today, Chris?
Well, it's been a good day because I've had lots of people. Normally, it's only me and you, Martin, here, or maybe 2 or 3 of us, and you know, we spend a lot of time in the public, which is great because obviously we are publicising the hobby. But today we've had 7 of us here, so we've actually had some time to actually operate. Now, at the moment, it's the HMS Belfast 80th birthday. It's been launched 80 years ago. So there's actually a special event station, GB80GGCN, which is operating from now until, I think it's 3 months. So if you've not got your logbook, listen out and perhaps work. So I've actually done quite a few contacts today on that. So I've been pretty much focusing today on doing a bit of HF. And we've been working on mainly 40 metres, myself and Matthew. And we've got a few contacts, not a massive number, but we've got a few, you know, we got a little bit of a pile up earlier. And got a few contacts in the log. And of course, the usual thing we do up here, which is to talk to the public and do Morse certificates. And kids always love doing Morse. You know, they get the kids and you get a bit of a queue. Sometimes it'll be really quiet and then you'll get a kid doing Morse and somebody else will spot them and they want to go. And then suddenly there'll be a queue form and you'll be there for half an hour. So, you know, everyone wants to have a go. So it's great. And even the little ones, even they don't really know, pressing the button and making a noise, you know, they enjoy that. So that's pretty much what I've been up to. And, it's always great fun. What time is it now? It's 4:45. It's starting to quiet down a little bit at the moment. So I know the guys in the room there, Edmund's been doing quite a lot of VH. In fact, he's actually been beating us, I think, actually on VHF today. He's been very, very busy talking to people on 2 meters. Again, with that special event call sign. And I know that I talked to the other guys working FT8. So yeah, I've had lots of activity today and really, really busy. But not so much today on the public side, more on the radio side, which is good.
Martin, you and I have sort of wandered around the ship and we've been trying to fix a handy talkie of yours, wandering around the ship creating havoc, really, haven't we? And not much more.
Well, a little bit of havoc. Unfortunately, it's not been raining today, so you've not been out there pushing the water off of the canvas roof onto the deck below. I'm sorry to grass you up to the listeners, but you know you do it. We often have to lean over the side and say, sorry! And the look on your face when we do that. Yeah, so we've been trying to fix a handy talkie, which does look a little bit odd when you walk into the Bridge Wireless office here. And you see all these old receivers and direction-finding equipment from the early days of the ship. And you see a modern laptop and a modern PMR handheld sitting next to it. It does look a little bit out of place, but no, we're having fun, we're learning. So I've not had much of a chance to get on the radio today, but say it's very, very crowded in that little room today. And guys like Edmund are here. You know, he's obviously made a specialist, taken the time out to come up here, make a special trip up here. So we'll let these guys get on the air today. And you know, if I don't get on the air today, I won't be particularly upset. Hey, I'll have a go next time round. Yeah.
That's certainly the fun. Is that we share the fun, and I think it's been a good day today. We must catch Edmund before he loses his voice, I think, and go from there. So thanks, guys, for a few seconds of what you've been up to. I managed to record a few minutes with a young family who did Morse code with us. My apologies for the audio on this one. It was quite difficult holding a mic and explaining and trying to show them how to use the Morse key, but I think you get the flavour from it. Now, don't worry about the microphone, right? Just be natural. Nobody's going to think, yeah? So, what I want you to do is do some Morse code practice for me. I want you to send some short ones, like this. Short ones, like that, yeah? Have a go.
So, do I spell some letters? Or?
No, just short ones to start with. Okay, now some long ones like this. Okay, Now, all of the letters are made up of short ones or long ones, or dits and dars, yeah?
Yeah.
So, as we look at it, what I want you to do is send your name one letter at a time, only one letter at a time, and I'll tell you what, for fun, and you must send your proper name, but if Chris gets it wrong, I'm going to give him a swimming lesson later, right? You ready? Send the first letter.
Oh, that's a good one.
Okay, now the next letter. And the next one. Right.
Last one.
Daniel, well done.
Oh, Daniel, I can't throw him over the side. So, wait for it, Daniel. We're going to give you a certificate. And I'm sure your sister's going to do really well. I can tell.
No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah.
You say that you don't know her name.
No, I don't.
Is it really long?
It's a long one, is it?
Wait for a while then.
All right. So, let's give Daniel his certificate. Hey?
There you go, well done.
Thank you.
Right. Now, exactly the same for you. If you can send me some short ones, some practice short ones like this. Yeah?
That's good.
Oh, that's really good. And some practice long ones. Like that. Oh, that's really good. Yeah, that's really, really good. Now, don't tell me what your name is.
Let's pass with the letters first.
No, we're going to throw you over the side.
Okay, no
Right. Are you okay to send your name one letter at a time? Yeah?
Evelyn.
Yeah.
Cool. That was a good one, wasn't it, Evelyn? That was really, really good. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, now, shall I be really naughty and ask Mum if she wants to have a go? Because she's had a big smile all over.
You should do it. Yeah.
Would you like to have a go, Mum?
Yeah. Yeah, now the thing is, right?
That's going to confuse you.
Yeah, we've got to go by pronunciation as well, so good luck with this.
There we go, Evelyn. There you go, well done.
Make her skin your swimming gear on.
Yeah. So, here we go, both of you.
Do you want to practice some short ones? And some long ones? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you okay to...
Yeah.
Right, when we're ready?
Now?
Yeah, first letter.
Ooh. I've got Zane.
Zanny.
Is that how you say it? Zana.
Yeah.
That's got to be worth a dip, isn't it?
Close, it's close, yeah. Yeah.
Zane, Zani.
So, Dave, wait, you get your certificate. And
Oh, yeah, thank you very much.
have you enjoyed it, your trip on the Belfast?
We certainly did. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. It's been years since we've been on it, it's great.
Yeah.
And obviously you've got a copy of the curve as well, there, so you can see it.
Oh, that's thank you.
What's going on there?
So Matt's with me, M0NJX. Matt, you've been up here on the Belfast with the whole team, or half the team, I should say, today. How's it been going?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I mean, I think it's the largest turnout I've seen in the Bridge Wireless office since I've been coming here for the past 6 months. And having work on HF today, we've been working a lot of German stations, Nordic stations, and some great stations from Northern Ireland near Belfast. So that having GB80GGCN in the book for them has been a great thing.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I did my famous shoot myself in the foot when a lady said she spoke German. So I said, what part of Germany are you from? She said, Austria. So it happens to me every time up here.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's not just a radio station. It's a public event thing for public to come in and take a look at the ship, ask us what we're doing a bit of Morse code certification with the kids or the adults. The parents are taking it, and you never know who's going to walk in. It could be a Greek family, Germans, Italians. It's a fantastic thing, and it's part of the connection with talking over the radio, and you never know which country you're going to speak to, what language you can try to return to them with. So it's great to have a bit of face-to-face contact.
And it's all about playing big boys' toys as well, isn't it?
Oh, come on! We have to admit, this is probably the coolest shack in London, to be able to walk off the street and operate from such a historic place, and to be honest, a shack that's pretty well kitted out. So no complaints from me.
Yeah, fine, Matt. Well, thanks for coming today, and we'll speak to you again on the podcast soon.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of recording myself to be recording myself on the podcast, so looking forward to it, Mark.
No problems, Matt. Cheers. So with Edmund, almost at the end of the day here on the Belfast, you come up from the south coast. You've been led astray by the Sutton and Sheen boys. How have you enjoyed your day?
It's been really good fun, Martin. Thank you for having me.
No problems at all, mate. You're always welcome. So how many QSOs did you do on 2 meters in the end?
Well, on 2 meters FM simplex, I managed 34, and that was 34 different stations, not multiples of the same person. And I was very pleasantly surprised at that, because on the way up on the train, I was thinking to myself, the HMS Belfast is surrounded by many tall buildings on lots of different sides. If I go on 2 meters, will the signal even get out at all? Never mind go particularly far. So I'm really, really pleased with the number of QSOs there, and it was all simplex, no repeaters or any other method. And several people made the comment that it's nice for a special event station to appear on that band, because many special event stations understandably and rightly concentrate on HF, but it's nice for local or semi-local people if the station also appears on 2 meters, because of course if somebody's out and about at an event or in their car or shopping or what have you, they're far more likely to have a handheld in their pocket or a VHF, UHF mobile rig in their car than they are to have the HF equivalent.
Yeah. And it's always good to have VHF on. Now, I happen to know you did do some HF as well, and I've been told you was doing French, German, and all sorts of things.
French and German is enough, yes. The 2 stations I worked were in France and Germany respectively. And, okay, French, I'm reasonably fluent at that. German, less so. But really, in any language, you don't need that big a vocabulary to hold a basic QSO. And more often than not, if you go halfway to meet somebody language-wise, they will more than happily meet you in the middle. I think that's what happened with the German contact. So that's another thing I would encourage people to have a go at speaking foreign languages, because not everybody can speak English or is confident to do so.
Yeah. Well, I know the guys worked Ed, DD5LP, another one of us podcasters, earlier in the day, but it wasn't you. But Ed got in the log. Now, did you ever go with the FT8? Was you looking at what was going on there?
I looked over a few people's shoulders and saw it in action, because as well as voice modes and CW from the HMS Belfast, there's a digital station which today anyway was being used exclusively for FT8. I have yet to discover the joys of that mode, and that's not because I'm particularly pro or anti it. It's just yet another one of those things that one of these days I'll get round to, but that day hasn't arrived yet. So now I've seen it in action, I'm perhaps slightly more encouraged to have a go from home, yes.
Yeah. So all in all, I think all of us, and there's only Edmund and Matthew left in here because the others have gone home. There's 8 of us here today. I think we've had a good day. We've worked near on 100 stations on all the different modes and generally have fun. So I think it was a good day. Do you guys agree or not?
Well, I certainly agree, and I'm quite pleased that the 2 metre FM station beat the HF SSB station by several.
It was only because it was contesting, and we struggled.
Yes, some people might say that the CQ Worldwide WPX contest this weekend sucked everybody away from QSOs to contest exchanges on 40 metres and 20 metres, and that's one explanation. I'm saying nothing.
No, I think you're a bit competitive, don't you?
Yeah, well, it's great to have competition across the bands, and to get and to be active, and that's the part. I mean, we weren't just operating on air. We were also talking to the public and giving away certifications for Morse code, and it's been a great activity. It's one of the extra elements of operating the radio from the Belfast.
Yeah. Well, as we come to close up the shack, as we're going home in a minute, I think we've all had a good day, and it's our once a month come and play on the Belfast. So it was good to see everybody here today, and we had Neil and Tim with us as well. So all in all, good day.
Yeah, if anybody's passing this way, I would definitely recommend a visit, and if you bring a copy of your licence and you ask the person who's in charge nicely, they might even let you have a go on one or two of the radios. And I was quite surprised actually how low the noise level seems to be on HF, given all the buildings surrounding us. Okay, I know it's a weekend, so maybe during the week it's a bit different, but even so, I was expecting a much higher noise level on HF, and I was also expecting a much more limited coverage on 2 metres as well. There's not a lift on today as far as I can tell, but the collinear is up very, very high, so we were talking to stations many tens of miles away. So yeah, well worth a visit. Come and see it if you can.
You're here, and I would just say happy birthday to the HMS Belfast.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. And I hope this feature has been of interest to you all. 73.
7-3.
Bye-bye.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
As we come to the end of episode 263 of the ICQ podcast, just a few things to let our listeners know. I'd like to say it was nice to hear from Frank Howell, ex-presenter of the ICQ podcast. And Frank, we really must talk again. I missed our chats on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon. So Frank, hope you're keeping well. That's Frank, Kilo 4 Fox Mike Hotel. As I say, good to hear from you, Frank, and I hope all's going well. I'd like to thank the presenters who joined me around the News Roundtable, Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB, Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MNG, Matthew Nasur, M0NJX, and Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX. Say the guys and I always have fun recording this, so hopefully you enjoy it as much as we do. If you'd like to get involved, and we're always interested in what you're up to, there are a number of ways to contact us. You can either contact us via the contact form on our website, which is www.icqpodcast.com, or drop us an email at info.icqpodcast.com, and we'd love to hear from you guys. As I say, while you're at our website though, which is www.icqpodcast.com. Don't forget to sign up to Colin's newsletter. It comes out about once a week, and it gives you some updates of things that are happening and lets you know when we've released another episode. There are a number of ways you can find us, and over the years you've often found us on things like iTunes and via our RSS feed. If you're finding problems getting some of the earlier episodes, please go to our website where you can connect to our RSS feed, and you'll be able to get all of our episodes. FeedBurner, which Google stopped development on a long time ago and a lot of people used, unfortunately, no longer works for us. So we can't help that. We're also available on TuneIn Radio and iHeartRadio and Spotify. So lots and lots of ways to get us. And for those of you who really want an easy way, we're also on YouTube, which is quite strange for an audio podcast, but we're actually on YouTube. So if you want to show your friends, an easy way to get there is just click on it. But don't download the YouTube video because it is absolutely massive. And it's just one picture and our audio file, but they put a picture for all the way through and the file becomes absolutely massive. So if you want to download the file, download from our website. Once again, www.icqpodcast.com. I'd like to thank each and every one of our listeners for your downloads. We really, really do appreciate it. And I know I say it every episode, but I do mean it. You know, without you, we wouldn't do this. And also I'd like to thank our donors, our £1 donors and our one-off donors. You do help us keep this podcast advert free and independent from outside sources telling us what they'd like us to say. Hi. So all in all, that's pretty much it. I'm going to now make that lovely Mrs. B her cup of tea. She'll be in from work in a minute. I'll find her a Chocky Becky. And don't forget, we'll do it all again in a fortnight's time. This is Martin, M1MRB, W9ICQ, saying 73.